Okay, so welcome back to Little T Play Stationeers. This is the first in a series of relatively short tutorials. Today we're going to be looking at the gas furnace. Um, Now, when you build it, it looks kind of weird, right? But basically it has an output for gas and an input for gas. We're not going to be looking at the input today. We're just going to go through how to manually make all the alloys. Um, Now in Stationeers you have three types of ingot, I guess. The ingots of regular stuff, right? So like iron, lead, nickel, gold, silver, and all that. And then you have alloys, which you use to make things like batteries and a slightly better EVA suit, those kinds of things. And then you have these super alloys, which you could use later to upgrade your manufacturing machines, right? Now, to make the super alloys, you need something called an advanced furnace, which again, we're not going to be looking at today. But I will later on do more in-depth tutorials on how to feed gas into furnaces and as part of that I will look also at the advanced furnace, because that's kind of how that works, right? It is possible to use the advanced furnace manually, but it is a real pain, right? So yeah, okay, to set up your furnace, you'll need 4 iron sheets, right? The furnace kit, 4 iron sheets, and a wrench, and your welding torch, right? You'll also need a valve, which you start the game with, some pipes, which you also start the game with, and an active vent, which you also start the game with, right? So I know I have this set up here going to some tanks and a filtration system, but I'll get into that shortly, right? Probably towards the end of this this video here. So first of all, set up your furnace, right? And then make sure that you connect a pipe to your output. And then I like to set up the valve immediately afterwards, because when you put this pipe here, that is going to count towards the overall pressure that is inside the furnace there, right? So when you put in your gases, if you have an extra long pipe, before you come to a valve, it's gonna count all of this, right? Some of the gas is going to get into these pipes as well, and it's going to kind of mess with your pressure and temperature a little bit, right? So I would set it up like this, right? Like the furnace, one pipe, and then a valve. And then once you've got your valves put down, you kind of need to. It doesn't really matter how long this pipe is, as long as it feeds into either a passive vent if you are in no atmosphere like we are now, because physics, right? It's a vacuum, so where does all the air go? But if you're on Mars or on Europa in particular, or any world that has an atmosphere, if you only have a passive vent here, what is going to happen is that the pressure is going to equalize, right? So, I like to use an active vent to be sure that when I open this lever here, all the pressure, all the gas is blown out of this active vent here, right? Now remember, with active vents, for them to blow, you need to have this switch here set to blue, and if you want them to suck, right, which is that what is here goes into the active vent and through this pipe and in that direction, then you want it to be set to red. So in order to evacuate the gas from this furnace, we want this set to blue. And in order to stop the gas from being evacuated immediately, then that's what the valve is for, right? Yeah. Now remember that active vents require some kind of power, whereas passive vents do not. So if you're on the moon, or you're playing in creative mode, then as long as your furnace is not inside an area with atmosphere, then a passive vent is just fine, right? But when there is atmosphere around the furnace, you need an active vent, right? Okay, so you either need to set it up like this, or if you've gone ahead and set up some kind of gas collection system, it doesn't have to be a filtration system to begin with. You could just connect up this pipe here to any kind of tank. It could, I mean, if you want to risk it, it could even be a canister holder, right? And a canister, but as long as there is a place for the gas to go, you will need a valve and this volume pump here, or a pressure regulator, but I would use a volume pump because it is faster, right? It acts pretty much as quickly as an active vent, right? So that's how you would open the valve, and all the gas would flow into your tank. And like I say, right, you don't have to set it up as part of a filtration system, but it is a good idea because that's how you're going to separate the gases in the end anyway. So it is worth setting up the filtration system before you connect up the furnace to a tank, right? But today we're not going to get into atmospherics and gas separation and all that good stuff. But just to take note, right, that that's kind of what you want to be working towards with your furnace, right? So I have set it up here just as a kind of basic, let's get the gas out of the furnace system, and that is because for pretty much for the purposes of reusing the furnace, it's infinitely less hassle to just flip this switch, send all the gas where the sun don't shine, and wait for the pressure and temperature to hit absolute zero, instead of messing around, figuring out how many more oxide, more volatiles. Believe me, it's just less hassle, right? So it's nighttime now, so I think we're going to go ahead and put in our first gases here, making sure that we close our lever on our valve. So pretty much the furnace makes, as I said, these alloys, and it also makes ingots of regular ore, the same way that the arc furnace does, right? So when you put your stuff into the arc furnace and hit the on button, you have to wait an eternity for it to smelt. With the gas furnace, it's a little bit more complicated to get going, but it is vastly quicker to smelt using the gas furnace than it is with the arc furnace, right? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to split off here. You only need one oxide for every really to get it going, and then 2 volatiles. But in order to kind of let's say you have like 6 stacks of gold that you want to smelt, or like 6 stacks of gold, and then 5 stacks of copper or whatever, like a full mining belt. I would put in 2, perhaps 3 oxide, and then 6 volatiles. So we're going to put in our 6 volatiles, right? Remember that when you put your oxide in, if this happens, right, you look at the contents window and this door doesn't open, just hit the activate button 2 or 3 times depending on how many you've put in, right? Usually it's like 1 time for each unit of ore that your ice that you put in, right? So let's put in our volatiles here. Just checking once again that, oh my goodness, super jump, right? So let's just make sure that we've closed our valves, right? Let's click the activate button until this dial moves. And you see, right, you know, the pressure and the temperature have gone right up with that 3 to 6 combination. Now, most things that you will be smelting that are not alloys, you know, they vary. Some are 300 Kelvin, some are 900 Kelvin. The pressure is all the same, including steel. So, you know, if you have 100 kilopascals of pressure, which we have, you know, way more than that right now, and you have a minimum of 900 Kelvin as the temperature, I would aim for 1.2 kilo Kelvin, well, whatever, 1,200 Kelvin, right? And then you could kind of put in, you know, all them stacks of gold and all those stacks of copper and all the iron that you have, right? So we'll just demonstrate that here, right? We'll put in this silicon, and you'll see that it is going to produce an ingot of 46 silicon, right? This process is lossless, right? So, you know, you put in 4 iron to the furnace and it puts out an ingot of 4. And we'll do the same here with copper, right? You know, so pretty much you can keep doing that. If you hit F1, go to atmospherics, and then scroll down until you find the furnace. It's a little way down on the list, right? Scrolling down on that, you will find what it manufactures, right? And if you click on, say, iron, right, and go down to the bottom of the list there, it will tell you that you need a minimum of 900 Kelvin temperature and a minimum of 100 kilopascals, right? Which incidentally is more or less what I like to aim for as my pressure in my bases, right? And you know, the maximum is 100,000 Kelvin and, you know, 100 megapascals, right? So, you know, if you ever get to that with this furnace, I think it will just explode, which is good fun. And I may demonstrate an explosion at the end of this video if you're well behaved, right? So, okay, let's close that out, and we're seeing now, right, that we could probably get away with making steel here, even after putting all that through, right? So steel, you're going to need 1 coal for every 3 iron, right? So, you know, if you have 10 coal, you're going to need 30 stacks of iron, right? And to make alloys, the proportions need to be, you know, millimetrically exact, right? So it's no good having 50 coal and then, you know, 149 iron, because that's not going to make steel, okay? So it needs to be, for every 50 coal, you need to have 150 iron, okay? So what I'm going to do here is empty out this this furnace here, right? Well, you know what? Because I've connected it up to this system here, I am just gonna disconnect this this pipe here, right? Which will have little to no effect on the pressure and temperature in the furnace. It's not going to pour out of this output here, right? Um, uh, which is partly why we have this whole system here set up in the first place, right? Because now I want to empty it. If I don't connect something to this output, then I have to kind of wait until it naturally, uh, you know, loses its pressure and temperature, right? Which, you know, it will go down slowly, but too slowly for my purposes, right? So I'm going to just quickly build a corner here and fit that into my atmospheric system, right? Because for a later tutorial, I'm gonna need this anyway. So, right. But just bear in mind, you know, if you're just starting off, then this is a perfectly adequate system. But you do want to start working towards something more like this over the course of the game, right? So yeah, let's go ahead and empty that. And I think what we'll do here is give the video the recording a pause while we are waiting for that to happen. And actually, you know, as I was waiting for this to happen, the sun came up, right? So it is worth noting that even on the moon, you know, it might not happen for a little bit here, but even on the moon, your ices, sorry, will begin to melt or sublimate, even with the sun just out, right? So that is worth noting. You know, so be careful of that, right? So the safest thing, you know, until you can get the furnace into some kind of vacuum chamber or shielded environment, you know, the best thing really is to do all your work at night. However, when you are in an area with no atmosphere, if you stand in the shade, because it's not in contact with the sunlight, then, you know, it doesn't melt, right? But the safest thing really is to wait until it's nighttime, until you start working with the furnace, until you have the workings of it inside your base. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pause again. Okay, so I went ahead and you know, waited until the sun was way overhead. I prepared, you know, behind the base there. You know, I went ahead and prepared like 3 oxide and 6 volatiles for making our steel. Now, if you find yourself in a situation where it's daytime, you know, and you do have just by chance, you know, or you've prepared them in advance, you know, your 3 oxide, your 6 volatiles, or whatever you're going to put into the furnace, you can operate during the day by clicking and dragging from your inventory, right? So, you know, that is a thing. Okay, so we're going to make sure here that we have our valve off, closed, before we hit the activate, right? Then we're going to put in our volatiles there and click activate until we get some kind of pressure. Now, the lower thresholds, as I said before, for steel are 100 kPa and 600 Kelvin. You know, so the most I've ever put into a furnace without, you know, panicking is 6 oxide and 12 volatiles. And if you want to make a lot of steel, you know, then you could do that, right? Just remember, to make steel, you need 1 coal for every 3 full stacks of iron, right? And it has to be exact, right? You know, it's no good making steel with 149 iron and 50 coal, or 49 coal and 151 iron, right? It has to be 50 coal to every 150 iron, right? So we're gonna just keep putting this in here, and unless it drops to like below 600 Kelvin, we have kind of all the time in the world here, because the pressure is kind of irrelevant for making steel. It's more about the temperature. You see here, right? It says contents 100 iron, 50 hydrocarbon, which is coal. And it's not telling us that we can synthesize or smelt an ingot, right? Now I have the choice here. I could use this iron ore stack of 50, or I could use this ingot of iron that I smelted previously. And either will do, as long as the proportions are 50 coal to 150 iron, right? If I wanted to put in 150 coal, that would be fine. I would just have to put in 450 iron, right? So I'm going to pull this lever, and presto, there is our 200 steel, right? And it's 200 because we put in 200 things, right? So let's pause the recording here and get on and do the other alloys. Okay, so what I've done really is just open this valve to let all of the pressure out, right? So that's pretty much all I did off screen. Now, when it comes to the other alloys, what we're going to make now is electrum. An electrum has a minimum pressure of 800 kilopascals. It has a maximum pressure of 2.4 megapascals, a minimum temperature of 700 Kelvin, and a maximum of 10,000 Kelvin, which in realistic terms is immense, right? So using the way that we're doing this, we're not going to reach 10,000 Kelvin in we're just not going to reach it, right? So really just focus on the minimum temperature, which is 700, and the pressure threshold, right? So it's a lot less than the 100 megapascals for steel and all the other regular ores. And now that we have this almost empty, we are going to put in our oxide, and for electrum we're going to put in just 2 volatiles, just as soon as that is ready, right? So we're going to kind of prepare this, and just 1 oxide, and that is because we're aiming for a particular threshold, and you'll kind of see in a moment, right? So we're going to put that in our bag there, and we're going to prepare by grabbing the gold and putting the gold and silver, which is required, right? So electrum is 1 gold to 1 silver. So if you have 500 gold, you need equally 500 silver. And again, you can use ingots instead of pieces of ore. Just make sure that if you have 552, well, you can't have 552 because the maximum ingot size is 500, but let's say you have 452 gold in an ingot, you are going to need to have a silver ingot of 452 as well, right? So the ratio is 1 to 1, right? So let's go ahead and put in our oxide. And that was really clever. What did we forget to do? We forgot to flip our valve, right? So let's not do that. Okay, so let's just grab that oxide one more time, right? So the pressure is now almost down. Let's swap this for this, just in case the sun comes up on us by surprise and melts our 1 oxide. Yeah, so leading by example there, right? Don't forget to close your valve once you've emptied the furnace. Now the procedure really for making electrum solder, and constantan, which Google tells me is pronounced thusly. I have wondered that for a long time. Google tells me it is constantan, right? Constantan, right? So there you go. Looking at it, I would have said Constantin, or but Google is king, right? So there we go. So yeah, for making electrum, constantan, and solder, the following procedure is basically the same. I will show you all three, just for tutorial purposes, but the procedure is more or less the same. Electrum has a little bit more nuance to it, as you will see in a moment. So alright, that's almost down. Okay, do you know what? I think that is okay. We can live with having a tiny bit of pressure there. So let's put in our oxide. Now that we have our valve closed, let's hit the activate button. Let's put in our volatiles and hit the activate button to get those going, right? And we really only need to do it once, right? So okay, we can see right away the temperature has gone up to 1.8 and is falling rapidly, and the pressure is going down. So we can probably just put in our gold and our silver right away, and not have to do all that crazy stuff that I thought we were going to have to do, right? So what happens, right, when you put in ore is that the pressure will go up, because you're heating something and there's a chemical reaction and stuff happens, right? Physics, chemistry, whatever, right? Science. So what we're going to need to do before that temperature falls down to below 700 is just ease some of the pressure out of the furnace there, right? So that the pressure goes to below 2.4 megapascals. If we look at the contents there, it's telling us we can produce an ingot of 100 electrum. Okay, so it's as simple as that. You got to kind of be a little bit quick, right? But just a second or two, just to ease some of the pressure out, and then you'll be able to produce your electrum ingot there, right? If we look here at solder, it needs a minimum of 300 kilopascals and a minimum of 300 Kelvin as the temperature, and the maximum pressure is 3.5 megapascals. So if we look here at the gauge, we could probably go ahead and grab our lead and our iron. Again, the ratio is 1:1 for solder, so we can probably go ahead and put in our iron. It's gonna process there. The threshold there is too low to make an iron ingot, but if we put this lead in, we should be within the temperature and pressure thresholds there to make our solder, right? And there you go. In the contents, right, it tells us we can produce an ingot of solder, so we're going to open that, and presto, right? There's our ingot of 100 solder, right? So that's pretty cool, right? We can kind of strategize to do things in an order that will mean we don't have to put in more ice to the furnace, right? So what's left here, we have iron and nickel, which is used to make invar, which I will go through after we make our constantan, right? So we have our copper and our nickel. Again, the ratio is 1:1. Basically for everything except steel, until we get to the super alloys, the ratio is 1:1, right? So electrum, 1 gold, 1 silver, invar, 1 iron, 1 nickel, constantan, 1 copper, 1 nickel, and solder, 1 iron, 1 lead, right? So let's go ahead and look here at our table, right? It's on the wiki you can find, which I will link in the description. On the furnace page, you will find a list, at least of the regular alloys And also remember hitting F1, right? We can go to the furnace page on the Stationpedia. If we look at Constantin, uh, you'll see, right? It says 0.5 copper, 0.5 nickel, right? So, that's 1 for 1, right? So we need to have a pressure of a minimum of 100 kilopascals, which is easy to do in the furnace. But we need the temperature to be between 1000 Kelvin and 1500 Kelvin. And at the moment, I believe we are sitting at 500 and something. So we are going to need to vent the furnace in order to start the process again. But if you're kind of following along, or whatever, the oxide to volatiles that you will need, again, for a 100, and I tend to do them in blocks of 100, simply because when you put more and more things into the furnace, the temperature goes down real quick and the pressure goes up, and it's hard to kind of gauge what you're going to be using, right? So I like to do them in just lots of 100, and to be honest, I mean, the things that you can build with these alloys, with the exception of steel, they don't really require a great deal anyway, so you don't kind of need to be producing stacks of 500 electrum and invar, Constantin and solder, for example. But steel, if you're going to build a big base full of like steel frames and steel sheets, then you're going to need a lot of it, right? So while that empties, I'm going to pause the recording and wait for the sun to go down. Okay, so I kind of went behind the building there to get into some shade, and we now have our oxide here prepared, right? And so, oops, that's not something I wanted to happen, right? So if you do that by accident, then you can just pull this lever and it will come out, right? Now, I will get into what happens if you already have something else inside at the end of this video, but yeah. So, okay, now that we have no pressure and no temperature, let's close this valve. Let's put in our 1 oxide, and that's because there's sun shining, right? It's already melted, right? So let's put our 2 volatiles in there, and that should, on activation, heat up, right? Yep. So now we have our pressure here. Let's put in our nickel. Copper, right? And as soon as the so we're gonna just wait here a second, right? Now remember, for Constantin we need temperature above 1000, right? So that's not what we have, and we've already put in our mix. So what do we have to do here? So we are going to risk putting a little bit more in here, right? So we're going to put in 2 volatiles and 1 oxide. Hit the activate button, and you'll see there the pressure is going right up, right? And so because Constantin needs good God. Because Constantin needs a pressure threshold of a maximum of 10 megapascals, that is fine, right? And the pressure threshold is 1000 Kelvin, so that is fine also, right? So that's kind of what you can do if you mess it up, like I just did. Now that should produce our ingot there of Constantin. So maybe you could put in, 2 to 4 to do Constantin, but 1 to 2 should be enough. Now we're going to have to get into invar, which is a little bit more complicated, right? So let's vent again, and I think this actually might be a good opportunity to go through what happens if you put in the wrong stuff, right? So we have steel here, which is already an alloy, and we're going to put in some iron, right? So that iron is going to process, and we're going to put in our steel, which is going to process. So this, what is about to happen, will happen if you put in the wrong proportions of things, or you put steel in, or any other alloy when you're not supposed to, right? So I mean, if basically if you have 2 ingredients and it doesn't say below those 2 ingredients, whatever they may be, will produce an ingot of whatever, and then you pull this lever, the following happens, right? These things come out. And what are they? Well, these are reagents, reagent mixes, and in order to separate these, right? What these are basically is like waste, right? That has come out because the furnace doesn't know what to do with this stuff, right? So you will need a centrifuge to separate them, and they will come out in many more reagent mix stacks, and then you will need to put each individual stack into the furnace in order to smelt them again, right? So unfortunately, at the moment, at least at the time of making this video, let me just hit that lever again, because what the point of this is to do this while we're waiting for it to depressurize, right? So at the time of making this video, there is no way to find out what these reagent mixes are made of. So the only way is to separate them with a centrifuge, which you build, I believe, in the autolathe. And then don't combine them, right? Don't like stack them onto each other. So if they come out, there's like just 50 stacks of one. What that means is that there are 50 different materials, right? So I'm spending a little bit too much time on this, but the point is, like, when you put them through the centrifuge, they will come out the other side as reagent mix, but reagent mix of whatever it is. Like if it's an alloy, they will come out as like a mix that is steel, which you will then put into the furnace. I'll just show you here what happens, right? So that's 50. We put in 200 steel and 50 iron, right? So what happens here is that the reagent mix is 40 steel and 10 iron, right? So we'll need to put that through a centrifuge. It will separate the iron from the steel, and then you'll put the 40 steel that comes out, right? So when you put that 50 through the centrifuge, 50 reagent mix will be converted into 10 iron, which will come out as iron, right? And 40 reagent mix, which will be steel, right? And then you will take that 40 reagent mix that is steel, which you won't know is steel until you put it into the furnace, and then you will have to heat the furnace up to the temperatures that steel requires, the temperatures and pressures that steel requires, and then when you pull the lever, it will come out as a steel ingot, right? So it's a little bit complicated, which is why I don't really want to have spent that much time going into it, but at least it has allowed us to wait to hear for this furnace to depressurize, right? So for Invar, we're going to use 3 oxide and 6 volatiles. Just as soon as this gets down to 0 here, we'll close that valve. And Invar requires a minimum of 6 megapascals and a maximum of 7 megapascals, so the window there is quite slim, and it requires a minimum temperature of 1200 Kelvin and a maximum of 2000 Kelvin, right? So you know it's quite tricky to produce, right? So let's close that valve. Let's get our oxide out. Let's split out 3. Let's put that in there. Let's get our volatiles out. Let's split out 6, right? Before we hit the activate, let's just do one final check. That's closed, right? So let's activate, right? Put in our volatiles. And before we hit activate here, we are going to put the materials here in our hand, because we are going to have to be pretty snappy here when we put our stuff in, right? So you're going to have to kind of monitor the dial here and look at the contents window, and as soon as you see between 6 and 7 megapascals and between 1200 and 2000 Kelvin, once you have put in your stuff, you're going to need to monitor this pretty quickly and then be pretty quick at opening the mold, right? So let's get on and do this. Okay, there we go. Let's put in our nickel. Let's get our iron ready. Iron in, right? Now let's monitor this. We're at 8.7, 1.5, right? And again, we may need to let out a tiny bit of pressure here, right? Okay, we're at 7. Turn it up. I think we're going to be okay, right? But as you can see, it's cutting it pretty fine, right? So there we go. Let's open that out, and we have our Invar. Okay. So we've seen what happens if you put the wrong mix in. We've seen what happens, how to make all our ingots there of the stuff. There may be more efficient ways. There may be, somebody with the Rosetta Stone of oxide to volatiles combinations, but that's pretty much it. That is how the gas furnace works. That's what we use it for. There is just one final thing that we need to look at, which is what happens when you overload it, right? So let's put in a bunch of volatiles there. Let's put in a bunch of oxide. And yes, so that's what happens when you overload it, right? And because I'm playing on Stationeers difficulty level here, that pretty much means that I am dead, right? I might be able to salvage this, but it's likely to be very broken, right? So yeah, that's the furnace. If you like the video, hit the like button. If you feel like subscribing, please do. I will be making more in this series. And if I've missed anything, or you have a better way, hit me up in the comments, right? I have the settings on my channel. I don't accept links without approval, but if it's a link to a site that I approve of, I will for sure approve your comment, right? But dirty links, or links to scam sites will just be deleted instantly, right? But please comment, please tell me things that I got right, things that I got wrong, things you like, things you don't like. Help me to improve in my tutorials, and have a great day. So that's Little T out.